They have, for decades, formed the grand centrepiece of state visits to the UK. Emmanuel Macron, the latest of many world leaders to be hosted by the King and Queen for a royal state banquet. Now, cameras are allowed in to capture a little bit of the pomp and ceremony, but what we don't often see is what goes on behind the scenes to deliver some of the world's most high-profile and possibly even high-stress dinners. Well, one person who knows a lot about that is Darren McGrady, who for 15 years served as a royal chef to Queen Elizabeth II, as well as the likes of Princess Diana, Prince William and Prince Harry. Welcome, Darren. Thank you very much for agreeing to pull aside the curtain a little bit, if you like. Describe what the preparations are like. How far in advance do you start getting ready for a state dinner?
So I was 11 years at Buckingham Palace, and over those 11 years, I worked many state banquets, including President Mitterrand of France in 1984. There's so much pressure that goes into preparing everything just to make it right. Everything's got to be right. We're representing the Queen or the King, and so all of the food orders will have been done so far ahead of the time. When I worked for the Queen, we would actually send 4 different menus up to her, and she would choose the one that she wanted. And it was always sort of local and indigenous produce, foods that would showcase the UK.
The Queen was always said to have had simple tastes where food was concerned. She liked the basics done well, done beautifully. What were her favourite sort of dishes?
So for the Queen, she loved to use anything from the estates. Now, a state banquet is difficult because you have over 150 people there, and it's difficult to bring all that produce in, whether it's, venison from Sandringham or grouse from Balmoral or something. But I do think that the Queen loved chocolate. She was a chocoholic. Anything chocolate we put on the menu, she would always pass and make sure that was on the menu. For a state banquet, it was often ice cream, and I think it's pretty hot in that room. So ice cream was just perfect. Now, King Charles is not a great lover of chocolate, so don't expect chocolate on the menu. But he does love lamb, and he does love local produce. So I can see lamb being on the menu if the menu's not been released.
Nowadays, all sorts of people have different requirements, don't they, for food, allergies and so on, intolerances. What sort of things change depending on the guest, and how flexible are you able to be?
One of the things we were lucky to have when I worked for the Queen was that there were no changes to the menu at all. And there were no gluten-frees, no lactose intolerance, no vegetarians, no vegans. And we just did the same menu. And if you didn't like it, then you stop for a burger on the way home, just push it around on the plate. Nowadays, I think the King is much more relaxed on that. But in the old days, it was fantastic. We just did the same menu for everyone.
In the olden days, it used to be a kind of roasted swan and things like that, didn't it? Presumably things have changed since those days. But could you walk us through a typical banquet menu? What sort of dishes would have been presented to people?
Yeah, well, roasted swan was on the menu, but now you're going back to Queen Victoria, and I know I look old, but I'm not quite that old. Yes, it was lots of beef on the menu because that's just easy to prepare. Venison still on the menu too, but normally the courses you would start off with a compound salad course, maybe an asparagus mousse, smoked salmon terrine or something like that. Then go into the main course, the entree, which would be venison or beef with all the side dishes and everything to go with it. Then into pudding. And I know we got President Trump coming to the state visit, and that's difficult because over here in the United States, pudding is dessert. Dessert is pudding. Whereas for the royal family, pudding is the sweet course after the main course. After that, it's then dessert. And dessert is actually fresh fruit. And that's all out on the table. So everyone gets to have fresh fruit dessert after the meal, 4 courses.
It must have been quite nerve-wracking, wasn't it? Did you have any disasters?
No, absolutely not. Not when I was working there. No, everything's run military precision. The timings and everything are just run to perfection. And if you think about it, a lot of the chefs have been there for years anyway, the staff too. And so the timings, they know exactly what's going to happen. And it's very rare for a state banquet to run over. And I think the Queen's page and the King's page are stood right behind them, and they're keeping track of timing and everything else. And all the food goes up to a little rooms either side of where the banquet is, and all the sourcing and everything else is just finished last minute. So any hiccups or anything, none of the guests see, and certainly the King doesn't.
These were the big occasions, obviously the big state occasions we're talking about, but you were the late Queen's personal chef, weren't you? What was a typical day like looking after her?
It was never a typical day for the Queen because, one day it could be a state banquet. The next day she could be over at Windsor Castle with just on her own, or with the Duke of Edinburgh. And so, people think that the Queen or the King now would eat, lobster, foie gras, and caviar every day. And that's not the case. As you mentioned earlier, it is a lot of simple foods. Yes, of course, when they're entertaining, the same as when we entertain, it's the more lavish foods. But day to day, it's dishes like we eat at home. It's dishes like mashed potato that has, the perfect amount of butter and cream and salt and pepper and a twist of nutmeg in there. It's every single component cooked to perfection. So for the Queen, often it would just be a salad for lunch with some grilled fish and a light meal during the day. And that's why I think she stayed so healthy.
And lived a very long and healthy life, didn't she, to a great age? Was there ever a request that surprised you, that perhaps even you weren't able to fulfill?
Whatever the royal family wanted, that's what we were there to prepare. And again, as you mentioned, the Queen wasn't a real foodie. She ate to live rather than live to eat. So it really was sticking with the more traditional dishes, whether it was sort of ice cream for dinner or something like that. Any food from off the estate, there was never anything that the Queen would then come in and say, "Oh yes, I found this recipe. I'd been on Google and found this recipe, and let's try this." It was the more traditional dishes that we did. Now, King Charles is more adventurous with his food. He was into organic food long before it even became organic, I think. And he would always arrive at Sandringham, at Windsor, at Balmoral with all this organic produce. So he's more of a foodie. And whether it's sort of foraging for mushrooms at Balmoral on the estate, or bringing in lots of Italian foods like pastas and risottos and things, I think, he's more of the foodie.
Mm. Things change, I guess. Things move on, don't they? Just
Yes.
pull aside the Green Baize door for a moment here. What will be the atmosphere like in the Buckingham Palace kitchens right now? What's going to be going on? What are they going to be doing?
So it's pretty much same old, and that sounds boring, but it's another state banquet in the kitchens, and it doesn't matter, if it's France, if it's Spain, if it's Portugal, if it's the USA. The chefs are trained to do their jobs and work in sections. It's called the party system. Each chef has a certain role to play, and all the timings are super important. The footmen are down there waiting for that phone call to take up the next course. You have chefs waiting upstairs with the sauce, ready to sauce over last minute, add any garnishes or anything like that. And everything does run literally to military precision.
You worked at Buckingham Palace all those years. I'm sure people ask you about this the whole time, don't they? But what is your outstanding memory? What was the Queen like? What was it like to be working for Her Majesty in Buckingham Palace?
I have so many memories working for the royal family, working for the Queen, and of course with Princess Diana too. Whether it was with the Queen being on the Royal Yacht Britannia, sailing into Miami with a huge flotilla of boats all around us, honking horns, the Royal Marines band on the top deck, playing a Life on the Ocean Wave, the sailors in the #1 uniform around the waist, and me in the Royal Galley preparing a souffle au citron foire, a cold lemon souffle, for the Queen, for President Reagan and President Ford. and General Schwarzkopf, who was being knighted for his part in the Gulf War. But at the same time, being at Wood Farm in Sandringham and just me being there and cooking for the Queen and her just popping her head through the door and saying, "Thank you, that was a lovely meal." That just meant so much to me, more than any medal or reward or anything.
Lots of happy memories. Darren McGrady, thank you so much.
My pleasure.